June 16th, 2006. An ominous, terrifying necropolis of the undead begins floating above the Plaguelands.
Naxxramas.
September 7th, 2.5 months later, the EU guild Nihilum claims the world first on Kel'Thuzad.
Yeah, Gungan.
But that's only the conclusion of the story.
Interesting. I didn't know there
What
was
really happened in an era of non-streamed content and propaganda. In today's Legacy, we're going to be looking at the drama that unfolded in that final week in September. Find out the failures of Blizzard, the frustration felt by many players, and of course, the joy and heroism of what the guilds did during the first ever race to World First.
I'm excited about this. Let's go, baby. All right, preach, lay it on me.
As I sit here with the Emperor of Man, let's set the scene. Classic exists. Many of you listening to this have probably been and played in the Classic game, or even cleared Naxxramas yourselves. Yet that might have given you a skewed view of what life on Azeroth was like in 2006. WoW's launch is well known by now. They did what Blizzard did best. See what everyone else was doing and simply make it way better. The launch saw 8 million players invading its servers by the end of 2006. If you were an MMO gamer, there was simply no way to avoid World of Warcraft. I was one of these players. The game looked weak compared to the hardcore PvP MMO Neocron I was playing, but I'm not the only one. The legendary Kungan himself, while playing Lineage 2, also thought the same. The problems we both had were that all our friends were setting sail to make their new homes in Orgrimmar or Ironforge, and not joining in was simply stupid.
I was on the other side of the fence. So I played RuneScape in 2002, 2003, 2004 came around, and I saw WoW on the shelf. And instantly, I was like, Mom, please buy this for me. I'll quit RuneScape. I've told this story before. I quit RuneScape. She bought me WoW somehow. I feel like she didn't just buy us things, but that instant she did. She got me WoW. And I was the one who got all my friends from RuneScape. I'm like, guys, you got to quit. You got to come over to WoW. It's so good. All my friends at school, I didn't have many, but there were a few. I told them, guys, you got to play WoW. This game is so good. I got so many people addicted. Like, Blizzard should pay me for the amount of people that I got addicted to this game over the years. I was the one that reeled everybody in. And it was fantastic.
The early raid clears of Molten Core, Onyxia, and Blackwing Lair were monumental feats. But the real impact of them were the stories they told. In the beginning, news of these moments were confined to Realm forums, each segment of the community celebrating their server's champions. By Blackwing Lair, it spilled out into the general raids and dungeons forums, and high-end raiders were becoming legends in their own right. Remember that Classic had linear progression. No Blackwing Lair without Molten Core first, no matter when you joined. As those 8 million people poured into the game, they started from step 1. For nearly all players, scratching around for their first high-level blues was the progress track that they were destined for.
I like how the spellbook
Even
just
to
opened.
witness players wearing Tier 2 was like seeing a god walk among mere mortals.
Hell yeah, it was.
Players simply lived vicariously through forums and videos about bosses they probably wouldn't ever see, and as such, the prestige of those defeating them rose and rose.
Yeah.
The Gates of Ahn'Qiraj war effort had such a lead up that speculation about who could defeat the old god first on a global scale began to mount. For the first time, the phrase world first was being discussed, and unlike today, many were in the running. Guild names like Drama, Curse, Risen, and Fury were all contenders, and interestingly, they were all US guilds. The EU hadn't claimed a
noobs,
single world first of one boss yet.
Those are the stats, guys. I'm not hating on Europe, but at that point in time, Europe was a bunch of noobs. I'm just saying, world first was an NA thing.
The US guild Fury picked up 5 of the 9 Ahn'Qiraj bosses in the first couple of days. 2 of the remaining 4 were optional bosses, so all eyes were on the Twin Emperors and Cthulhu himself. The late gate opening wasn't the problem it would be today, though. Remember, at this time, raids were taking months to clear. Vodka, a stellar guild, managed to kill the Twin Emperors 6 days from it opening up, clearing the way to Cthulhu. And then, nothing. Except a word from our sponsor. Warframe, more specifically, the Whispers in the Walls.
Warframe,
we are big
baby.
fans of Warframe. They've been super nice to us, and we have put so many hours into Warframe over the last year or so that you guys just need to jump in. It's available now on all platforms, and they've got 10 years of content that they've been making that's all there for you for free. Huge cinematic set pieces and quest lines to go on that are super intriguing in this space adventure, and this is gonna be one of their new ones. Whisper in the Walls has mysteries for solving. Who is the man in the wall? Who are the Eldritch Murmur and the mysterious Albrecht Entrati? All these thrillers and things that you want to find out as you travel across the solar system. If you haven't jumped into Warframe before, you absolutely should. It's totally free. You get to play in these enormous suits that have so many cool and interesting features and weapons that you can all play in cooperative team play. And they're bringing out the new one, a 55th Warframe called Corvex that has like multi-layer radiation weaponry that you're going to get to play with, as well as a brand new void weapon called the Grimoire that you're going to be able to equip as like a tome type device and get going with it. Cool. So it's the beginning of Warframe's brand new narrative arc. I recommend you jump in and get involved with it, because honestly, when I did, I ignored this game for so many years, and when I jumped in and found out just how much content is here, how much they keep updating it, and how much stuff they bring with it, it's absolutely extraordinary. So Whispers in the Walls is available now on all platforms. Go and check it out, guys. You're not going to regret it.
Warframe, there we go. Okay.
No Cthulhu kill for 3 months.
Really? Wow. So Cthulhu
The Twin Emperors
really
died
hard.
on the 29th of January 2006. Cthulhu, the 25th of April.
Wow.
It's just common knowledge now that Cthulhu was just impossibly hard and Blizzard just did nothing.
I kind of like
For
that.
3
That's kind of cool.
months. As an aside, it was Ian Hazacostas, Watcher himself, long before working at Blizzard, that had mathed out Cthulhu's current immortal status. Can you imagine?
Wait, before Ian worked at Blizzard, he was a sweaty WoW player? Yeah, that's actually kind of cool. That's what we were talking about earlier with Johanna, the new president. I was like, okay, has she been a sweaty WoW player before? Because I think that actually like means something. Dare's post above basically nails it. I don't agree that phase 1 needs to be toned down. Honestly, on our better days, we consistently get it to phase 2 in about 6 minutes with 38 to 39 alive. Forward, if you want to use battle resist and good mana, it's fine. In theory, there are unfair and unlucky ways to die. In practice, those unlucky things seem to happen to some peeps a whole lot more than others and never happen at all still to others. Anyway, piece 2, basically, I don't think many people care much about what trade secrets anymore. I just want to see Cthulhu killed. I don't really care remotely as much as I did if we're the first ones to do it. Some further insights in defeat 2.
Mathed out Cthulhu's current immortal status.
He was an
Can you
OG
imagine
Scarab Lord? Oh, cool.
the
I
race
never
to
knew that.
world first now with something like this? It really was the Wild West back then. The end result was a world first by some silly, petty EU guild named Nihilum. They were very big in the EU, but on the global scale?
Some silly.
And why did they get it? Well, the answer is interesting. A hotfix to Cthulhu went out to EU before the US, in the Wild West of Blizzard just pushing hotfixes whenever they were ready. Cthulhu literally died as the US was logging in the next day. Oh, that pesky
I never
EU
knew
head
that.
start. But what of the other bosses, the optional
The
bosses?
pesky
Well,
EU head
Uro
start.
died after Cthulhu did. The day after, actually. After the hotfixes. But Vicidus died on the 5th of March. 2 months before Cthulhu died, and a month after Twin Emperor. How many guilds killed it? 1 guild. 1 guild did the impossible, that the community thought just needed to be fixed. 1 guild managed to figure it out.
Death and taxes. Okay.
Death and taxes had always been in the top contention discussion, picking up a world first on Firemore in July 2005. Have you ever heard the phrase, kite it to Vale's room? Well, it's old school, but it comes from Death and Taxes. I'll link an article below for more details on that for those of you interested. Death and Taxid had proven themselves more than capable of getting that world first, their name being well known globally for the invested followers of the early kills. Disaster struck for them in AQ, however. The opening of the gates was different per server, depending on how popular the realm was and the contribution of the player.
Bro, this hits different after watching Barney64's Scarab Lord series. Like, all of the work that went into this, man.
To the war effort.
Oh my gosh.
Death and Tax's gate opened much later than others, and with the EU early fix, Cthulhu just wasn't possible. However, their Vicidus kill, that was shrouded in mystery even to its newest members, had shown them in a brighter light than anything else. They were so good, they had killed what was thought to be an unkillable boss. And thankfully, for those hungry raiders, the necropolis was coming.
You have no idea what horrors lie ahead. You have seen nothing. The frozen heart of Naxxramas awaits you.
It's important to remember that even by the end of Vanilla, 7 months after Naxxramas was released, less than 2% of the player base even went inside.
Yeah, I
Nax
didn't.
was for the best of the best of the best. At this point, the player base is still exploding at the same rate it had.
I kind of like that. I talked about this in another video I was watching. It might have been the Barney series. Oh yeah, there's content that's gate capped for like the top 1%. I know when you say it out loud, it sounds stupid. Like, why would you spend time designing content for people that are never gonna see it? But I think, as someone who never rated Nax back in Classic, I think it was really cool to aspire towards a player walking around in tier 3, inspecting them and being like, oh, that's awesome. And it gives me something to then push for. Similar to how gladiator mounts or rank 1 titles at one point in my WoW career, I was like, wow, that's awesome to see someone AFK on their gladiator mount in the rank 1 title outside Stormwind City. I'm going to inspect them and drool. Like, that's cool. And then it pushed me to then become a top player, right? And I think having that is necessary and exciting for the general population. The problem is today, I think if Blizzard released something that was like too hard that only 1% of people got to ever witness, you would hear the entire player base complain that like, I can't do it, this is too much time and I won't be able to ever get to endgame. And people are just gonna complain and whine until Blizzard makes it easy enough for everyone to do. I don't know, I think it's really awesome to see an entire raid like this that is so epic, but only the top of the top of the top can achieve. And the other players are kind of more just watching and rooting along from the sidelines and maybe thinking if I put enough time in, then I can eventually get there. But it gives them something to aspire towards, right?
Had since the game was released 2 years earlier. It should be noted that the player base didn't mind that there were raids they couldn't ever hope to see. They had plenty of content from Molten Core to Anchorage for them to do.
Yeah.
And similar to today's Mythic raids, the rest of the player base was happy to see what their realm heroes would achieve.
So I guess today, Preach said it, you have Mythic raiding today, and most people will never get into the Mythic version, but it's like, let's be honest, a very similar version to like the non-Mythic raid that, it's not like a complete unique raid, but yeah.
This was it. The first real race to world first. Global eyes on what these players were doing. And all we could do as non-raiders was watch in awe as these people went in and we got kill updates via the forums. This was about the time when there was gentlemen's agreements going on between the guilds. Nobody would release a video of a boss kill until that boss had been killed 5 times. And then it was the precedent of whichever guild had killed it first to release their video first. No live streams, no live updates. Only way you could get information if you were stuck on a boss was to whisper a friend or somebody in that guild and hope they would give you info, or friends share little things. Where do you start? Naxxramas has 4 wings open to you when you get inside. And without live streams like we have today, where you can watch the top guilds go here, try this boss, try that. So by the time you get in there, you know exactly where to go. This time, it was different. Afterlife head to the Spider Wing and make short work of Anubra Khan, but find Fairlina to be their first wall. Fury head into the Death Knight Wing and crush Resuvius, but Gothic is a weird boss. Needs raid balance the game hasn't seen before, so they get stopped. Surreal, they decide to go to the Plague Wing, kill Noth really quick. But we all know that the next up is Hygen the Unclean. Not only is the dance tricky, but at launch, Hygen would lag the whole game out. After the first day, 3 bosses are down. Only Patchwork, the biggest output chain the game had ever seen, remained standing of the first wing bosses. The following day, Afterlife, who had stayed and pushed the Spider Wing, managed to kill Fairlena, and then nothing for 2 days. By this time, word was spreading fast that Nax was hard. Really hard. In our garage, half the raid was dead and cleared by day 1, and here we are day 3 and only 4 bosses have died? Rumors were spreading that Nax was a literal meat grinder. The shock came on day 4. Death and Taxes rose. Patchwork, the boss already being called the monster of the raid, was defeated, and shockingly, they killed Grobulus and Gluth on the same day, showing that Patchy was indeed harder than the bosses he protected. Death and Taxes were now staring down at Thaddeus. Well, we'll come back to that. The final boss of the reset to die was Mexner, by Forgotten Heroes, and after an entire week with the best of the best, pushing 8 bosses had died. And no sign yet of Nihilum, the EU champions. Although the record book of first kills doesn't show it, Nihilum were chasing, just behind everyone, as the US domination seemed to be repeated.
Wait, so since there wasn't live streaming, they weren't like inputting their kills as like they were like kind of going under the radar of like they didn't say, oh, we killed this, they were just going for the final boss. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Maybe this time no strange bugs would give EU a win.
Wait, that's kind of sick. Yeah, it's like a dark horse.
Silence on progress for 6 whole days. Again, unheard of in the modern era. 7 bosses alive and no kills?
Oh, they
For those who have recently played Classic WoW and maybe even smashed Naxxramas, you may be confused. Nax has been done. Analyzed, reanalyzed, guides have been made, articles written, private servers farmed for years. The increased difficulty of modern raids and so on and so on. In 2006, players just didn't have the knowledge or the resources the modern audience has. Just look at these videos of the first kills. No range trackers for healers to see who they could heal or if they couldn't. No world buffs, no flasks.
Yeah.
That kind of thing just wasn't done. It was unheard of. Flasking a whole raid was well beyond the reach of a raid guild in terms of costs and resources. Day raiding wasn't a thing outside of the first day. The min-maxing of characters that has been studied and refined for 20 years just...
That's what made WoW so fun, though. Like, when you didn't come in with everything of the best and you kind of just played the game, gathered what you could, and went off. It was really challenging and... Yeah.
Didn't exist yet. They were not only playing blind, but also with a power level drastically lower than what those of you in Classic probably used. On the 30th of June, 10 days after the raid had opened, Death and Taxes did it again. They did something the other Nax guilds wouldn't do for months. They defeated Thaddeus.
Nice.
Just think of how Thaddeus works. Its main mechanic, polarity shift, constantly changing whom you could stand next to in the chaos that is a 40-man raid. Now do it with 0 add-ons. Although add-ons did come later in vanilla, they certainly weren't around in the first few days. And then add the crappy PCs people were playing on in 2006, and it shows just how good they were.
But you can see the lag in
At this point, they were killing bosses nobody else could, and they seemed the early favourites to take it all. Fury had stuck to the Death Knight wing and managed Gothic on the same day. 10 down, 5 to go, but the difficulty is spiking hard now. A few days later, after some hotfixes, Risen showed their name by bringing down Hygen the Unclean. This opened the door to the consumable, demanding Lowertheb. The hotfix allowed others to pass through Hygen shortly after. Guilds got to farming shadow protection potions for the 40 people to chug, and it was Deus Vox who brought down the final Plaguewing monster of a boss 2 weeks after Hygen had died. That's right, my friends. It has now been a month since Naxxramas released, and there are still 3 bosses standing. The forums were
as a spectator, I love having many weeks to see like who is gonna figure out how to navigate through the raid first. As a raider, it probably sucks ass because it's like I can't just put my life on hold for months and months and months on end to raid 16 hours a day. But as a spectator, it's fun. As a raider, ugh.
Blaze, how the hell do you deal with the Four Horsemen? So many guilds had reached them and everyone had been humbled and humbled fast by the former heroic souls atop their steeds. And this is where the raid takes a historical dark turn. Tanks, warriors, especially those with some Naxxramas gear, were disappearing like some alien invasion. Guilds were being raided across the realms. Remember, this is the pre-realm transfer, so these thefts were crippling the guilds on each server.
Wait, what?
Suddenly, guilds with a little bit of Nax progress couldn't go any further as their warriors were all vanishing, and they had to recruit from lower down the tent pole and reprogress. It became apparent that the guilds working on Four Horsemen needed those warriors, and as such, were poaching from their competition rather than hoping to eventually get the gear on reclears. While strats are different in the 2020 version of Nax, back then 8 warriors were desired. The reason was that Nax warrior tier sets had a bonus where their taunt ability wouldn't get resisted, and the Horsemen needed it. The gap between the top and everyone else just got wider. While the top guilds poached and moved forward, the lower down guilds fell further behind. Guilds were complaining endlessly of how they were being hamstrung, but it didn't matter. The hardest race in history was still going strong. And then, out of nowhere, like a sudden air raid siren blaring through the streets, the forums were reignited into a frenzy. 5 weeks in. The news spread across the world almost instantly. Death and taxes had done it. The Four Horsemen were dead.
Nice. Okay, so they're set up for world first then.
All 4 wings were clear.
Sick.
And Sapphiron was available.
Time for Saf. So at this point in time, we still don't know what Nihilum's up to. We don't know how many they've cleared. Either they haven't been clearing or they have been clearing and not telling everyone, if I'm understanding this correctly.
I truly wish I could let you know how exciting this was and frustrating at the same time. We had been following this race for months, and all we could do was sit back and refresh the web pages over and over again, waiting for some kind of update. Had this boss died? Why were the Four Horsemen so difficult? What was causing these guilds to get stuck? And more importantly, what was this undead dragon going to be like?
Like the absolute pros they are, Death and Taxes released a teaser video of the Sapphiron formation for the world to see. And what a spectacle it was. It probably looks kind of mid to people now, but in 2006...
Yeah, it's pretty sick.
There was nothing like this animation in the whole game. It was simply amazing. We all sat back in awe at what these champions were facing down.
That's pretty cool.
Frost resist was the key, and thankfully the guild Dread of Kor'gath lent their frost runes to Death and Taxes to build their frost resist armor for the fight. After a full week of crafting this new armor, re-clearing the raid, Sapphiron fell. The block for it being just frost resistance rather than mechanical difficulty, a sort of wet end to what was about to come. But the gates were open to Kel'Thuzad.
Cool, cool.
But 2 days later, Sapphiron fell again.
So that's
The
Kungan's guild?
EU guild Nihilum
Okay, yeah.
were right behind them.
Sick.
What we're about to discuss is probably the most frustrating and disheartening thing you will ever hear of happening in World of Warcraft. But one thing to remember is that by today's standards, this could never, ever happen again.
Back in old WoW, though, it will not be the last time. The issue is genuinely propaganda. No streaming, no regular updates, so info on what was happening between these two guilds was leaks and hearsay.
Right.
It was also relatively common to have faked screenshots and lies be told by the guilds to rattle the competition.
I feel like those are the stories we're going to tell our kids and our kids' kids, like when we're grandparents or just like, you know, we're in our 60s and 70s, and the conceptualization is going to be difficult for them to, for it to be there. It's like, we didn't have the internet at large. If someone was doing something, you just, like, you didn't know they were necessarily doing it until like after, and you talked to them or called them, or like they could upload it, but that would still take like a lot of time. Like the communication was just slower. That's going to be such a crazy concept in like 30, 40 years from now. To be honest, even for the kids today, that's probably like kids that grew up in the last 10 years, like that's probably hard to conceptualize to some degree. They won't be able to, yeah, it's hard to even like fathom that, right? And like in our generation of like, oh yeah, there was no cell phones or no electricity, or like we, instead of cars, we rode by horse. Like that's hard to like think about, of like the intricacies of that. That's going to be the story we tell like when we're like really old. It's like, yeah, we lived in like pre-internet age, right? Oh, I mean, the internet kind of existed, but like it wasn't really expanded to the point where you could just instantly connect with anyone all the time and everyone was aware of everything happening always. Really interesting.
So how do we get the truth, my friends? Well, we go to the source. I reached out to both Death and Taxes and Nihilum, to the soldiers who were there that fateful week to find out what really happened.
That's kind of cool. He reached out.
I want to give this moment a shout out to Lenny from D&T and the crew of his old members who answered any questions I had.
Oh, cool.
Also a shout out here to Close from Nihilum, who bought me many Danish beers in Copenhagen recently, making me very drunk, but also accepted my gift for his new baby, which became their favorite Christmas present. Smiles, Kenny. 5 days. 5 days. After this 2.5 month journey from Naxxramas release, it was just 5 days from Sapphiron falling for Kel'Thuzad to end up in his phylactery. Both guilds agree that Kel'Thuzad wasn't particularly hard, especially compared to what they had already faced, and you recently saw the hardcore version die on its first pull. So what happened?
MP, no.
Forum chatters would have you believe that Nihilum just played better and won in the end. Hell, it's what I thought for a long time. Radio silence was coming from the US, but in the EU, screenshots were being released of Nihilum getting Kel'Thuzad to 1%, not just once or twice, but a few times. If it wasn't that hard, and Nihilum arrived second, and D&T had cracked the hardest bosses in this raid so far, then how? How could it be that they didn't win? Were they just burnt out?
Okay.
Did they just drop the ball on the last boss? Well, neither. You see, my friends, it is extremely hard to kill a boss that doesn't exist.
It wasn't spawning for them or something?
Death and Taxes approached Kel'Thuzad full of fire in that frosty tomb he called a home. And they got to work. The first couple of pulls, they are seeing what he does, getting their positioning down, and after pull 5, though, something strange happens. Kel'Thuzad just doesn't respawn.
Oh, that's so annoying.
And his gate to his room is closed.
Oh,
Death and
come
Taxes
on.
stare through the bars at an empty room and no boss.
Oh, come on.
These days,
They got
during the Race to
yoinked.
World First, the players have access to a Discord that has the developers in there. Should there be something important happening, they can have instantaneous communication. We saw that with the most recent Race to World First. Tindral was lagging everybody out, the devs are on it, and they feed that back to the players. They're going to be nerfs to the bosses, they find out. Are the players doing something that is not allowed? The devs can feed back immediately to stop doing that. But back then, you had to email customer support.
Write a letter, bro.
And D&T tried everything.
Oh, come
They
on.
emailed. They called the hotline. They tried reaching out to Bill's brother's sister's cousin who has a wife who may know somebody who works at Blizzard.
Oh my gosh.
To nothing. 4 days. 4 days, Death and Taxes, who had reached the last boss first, zoned into Naxxramas to stare at a closed gate and no boss behind it. Any lead they had built through their sheer amazing gameplay was lost.
Nihilum didn't have this issue. Yet. The boss didn't bug out in the EU. For
11 FPS. Oh my goodness.
a couple of days, Nihilum got to progress and work on the boss that Death and Taxes couldn't even attempt. Despite the rumors of a fake screenshot, Close confirmed it was absolutely true. Nihilum did have several 1% wipes before again, disaster. On the Tuesday, just before the EU reset, Kel'Thuzad didn't respawn and their gate closed as well. The difference being, Death and Taxes hadn't even seen past Phase 1, despite their early arrival.
Just a bug.
With the EU reset coming, Nihilum sprung to action. Close called into work sick, as did many others, so they could day raid. Again, at the time, a super hardcore move, and even more extreme than that, they got world buffs and flasked the whole raid.
Oh my gosh.
This is
Even
absolute absurdity. Mountains of nerd sweat never before seen in this game.
Yeah.
They fully re-cleared Naxxramas that morning, and on the 7th of September, Kel'Thuzad was defeated.
Wow.
This was such a monumental moment that their server was flooded with level 1s to share in the celebration of EU dominance of the raid and over the US guilds. Nihilum killed Kel'Thuzad just as Death and Taxes reached his gates again.
Wait, so EU got their world first, but it was just because NA was lagging. So, I mean, yeah, so it probably doesn't really count. So NA over EU still, guys. I mean, I'm not saying that. That's what Preach just said. So I'm just summarizing the video.
Imagine how this must have felt for those players. They had pushed. They had killed. They had figured out the hardest bosses of this raid before anyone else. 2.5 months of slogging away, farming, refarming, crafting, negotiations, tactics, and discussion, only to stand staring at an empty room for nearly 4 days, and then have all the glory taken away.
Oh, not the glory, not the glory.
I quote here from Lenny, who recounted to me that moment and how they felt. We were pretty deflated, as you'd say.
Yeah.
So once we got the bad news, people weren't playing as well. There was a bit of an argument about how much frost resistance we should wear for a moment. Overall, the hit to our morale cost us US first.
Oh, man.
Since another guild snagged that after learning the strategies for the 4 Horsemen, Saffron, and then probably had an easier time with Kel'Thuzad from the momentum of their catching up.
Oh, wow, so they didn't even get world
You
second.
heard it right. Death and Taxes was so down, they didn't even get the US first.
Oh, no.
A crushing and terrible stain on the history of the race to world first. And thankfully, this is something that couldn't happen now.
The first ever race to world first will go down in history as
I like how he
cementing
has his coat
Naxxramas
on.
as when the game took to the next level. For the first time ever, millions of gamers gathered around like armies to watch their heroes battle against these large monsters. Yes, it's filled with frustration for some, joy for others, but as we all know, that's not where the story ends. Next time, we're off to the Burning Crusade. Betrayal, manipulation, happiness, victory. It's all going to happen for us here. So thank you everybody who's supported us in our journey, and we'll see you again next time.
Okay, cool. Yo, thank you for linking this. I think it was Taylor who linked it in the Discord on the React section. I appreciate that. This was an awesome watch. One, I didn't know any of this. I didn't know that there was a controversy at all. And I didn't know how close it was. I didn't know about KT bugging out, and all of that stuff. So yeah, cool. One of the most interesting things to me is how success stems, right? And when we look at examples like this, and I'll give more here in a second, we see sometimes people start trends of success on an accident or luck, right? So let's look at Nihilum. They got world first. You know, I'm not taking anything from Nihilum. I'm friends with Kungan, and you know, they're awesome. But let's just say, for the sake of the discussion, that there was an element of luck. I think most people could agree with that. If the gates never closed, maybe it would have looked different. Maybe it would have looked the same. That's not my point. My point is, maybe it would have looked a bit different, right? But since KT did bug, Nihilum did get world first. Now, here's my point. Once they have the confidence of becoming winners and becoming the world's top guild, maybe based on luck or an element of luck, then you can bring that momentum into the next raid, into TBC, and like go like, yeah, we're the world's best, and start prepping and like start positioning appropriately as the world's top guild. But say Nihilum didn't get lucky, if they did, and didn't see that form of luck, and then never got that world first in the first place, maybe they would have had a different momentum swing into TBC and the Wrath of Lich King, and we would have seen a whole different thing happen throughout history. And it's really interesting to think of like what elements of history began on a stroke of luck. So for me, getting my first rank 1 title, actually we precede that. Getting my first gladiator title, I would say, was a bit lucky. The way it worked for me to get my first gladiator is, I've told this story before, but not many times. So most of you probably don't know about this story. Basically, back then, okay, this is a notepad. Back then, Gladiator was like this in season. What season? 11? Season 11 was my first Gladiator. Let's say like around 2450 rating on BG9. It's like the hardest battle group, right? And I was going for it for my first time. And I found 2 players out of trade chat. We played Warrior Mage Druid with 2 players named Ziphius and Mike Conlon were their names. And we played WMD out of trade chat. That's not very significant, but we did okay. We got to like 2200 our first queue session or something, or like even like 2100. We weren't like crushing it. We were doing okay, but we were like, wait a minute. We can slowly start pushing this up and start a gladiator push. So what we did is we woke up at like 7 a.m. the next morning to avoid like all the best teams queuing. And we just queued into a bunch of noobs at 7 a.m. and we grinded to like 2300. And we're like, wait, this kind of owns. So the next morning we woke up at 7 a.m. and we just got like 1 or 2 wins. And we got to like 2320. And then the next morning at 7 a.m. we did the same thing. So we kind of just tried our hand at getting a couple lucky queues. My point is we got kind of lucky and we did this method until we got to about 2400. And that still wasn't good enough to get us Gladiator. We were still a little bit too low because it turns out when you queue at 7 a.m. and there's no one else playing and you get a win, you only get like 4 points or 5 points. So if you go like 5-0, you are only up like 20, which is like, yeah, that's hard, right? It's hard to grind up when you're doing that, but you're not fighting the top team, so you're not getting smoked either. And then we had another team join our roster and they helped us get from 2400 up to like 2450 to get Gladiator. I can't remember the exact team that did that for us. Part of me wants to say it was Samulex. If you guys remember Samulex, he was the We Are Farmers guy. I think it might have been Samex. He needed a team to play on for his Gladiator push. And there was like a day or 2 until the end of the season. And we're like, yo, use our team. You can play. Samex was already a Gladiator at the time, needed a team. Our team was already 2400. And I think it was Sam. I think it was Sam. Anyway, he needed a team. And we're like, use our team. We have the games. We have the CR. You don't have to grind a team. And by the way, if you get the team up, well, then we'll get Gladiator too. So it worked out perfectly, which is a ton of luck, right? A ton of luck for all of those things to happen, for me to find the right teammates, for me to get the right queues at 7 a.m., for Sam to need a team at the same time a couple of days before the season end to grind the team up. So much luck, right? And then I got Gladiator. And from Gladiator, guess what? You can find better partners. And then rank 1, and there's a similar story with like lucky rank 1. I found a random person named Beanslayer X, which is twitch.tv/Bean. He was my first rank 1 partner, and Fusion, and a lot of elements of luck to get those partners together. And then I got my first rank 1. Moral of the story being, there's elements of luck that then supersede success. And then once you get success, it's easier to then breed success continually from that element of luck. And I think that's really exemplified pretty well here in this video from Preach. It's like, wait a minute. Nihilum, without question, is one of the best guilds of all time. And they have so many world firsts. And the start of it was based on a little bit of luck, huh? And it's like, well, if you think about it more deeply, of course, yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a really cool conversation to have. Yeah, really, really cool. Nihilum already had world first in Cthulhu. I mean, he talked about that at the start of this video too, though, right? That it was like kind of out of nowhere.